Souls fans like Bloodborne is, I think was a step in the right direction in this regard. In that game, you had agency over which moves your guy unlocked, and when he did, and you could pursue optional fights for upgrade points which gave you more chances. One reason I think many people were turned off by Sekiro was that game's extreme entry level. Sekiro's combat blew every other Miyazaki game out of the water depth-wise, and although that core might have been more than some players wanted to handle, as it might have resulted in some unpleasant early hours, and because it seems to deliberately punish players who rely on Souls reflexes, that game's extensive core was necessary to allow the late game the freedom to get more expansive, since it needed to not be locked behind specific upgrade paths. The reason why Sekiro's early game could not have been paced better to allow players to grow into the more complex combat was that the late game was built on top of the beginning. Since the upgrades in Sekiro are mostly optional, it kinda comes with the territory that the game can be completed without them. And for Sekiro to enable the complex late game without excluding any build, it needs to be beatable without any optional upgrades, which means everything in the late game must tie back to the core in the early game. And since Sekiro's late game combat is so much more complex than any other Miyazaki games is, the early game complexity is scaled up with it. And this is relevant to our look at Bloodborne. Bloodborne has a much simpler core than Sekiro, but because it does, the late game has fewer dimensions to spread out into without forcing upgrades on the player.